My name is Shara Kingston, and I am the collections manager for the Army Museum. And today I brought in Laura May Hubley's medals and luggage. She was a nursing sister in the First World War.
Of the 424,000 Canadians who travelled overseas to fight in World War I, 2,845 served as nursing sisters. Originally part of the Canadian Army Medical Corps, the nursing sisters arrived in Europe as members of the Canadian Expeditionary Forces, responsible for providing medical support services. These women risked their lives to provide treatment and care to sick and injured Army personnel. Stationed in field hospitals, casualty clearing stations, and transport ships across England, France, Belgium, Russia, and the Mediterranean, their vital role continued long after the war in rehabilitation centres and military camps ravaged by disease. A total of 58 nursing sisters perished in the Great War. Their contributions and sacrifices are memorialised on Parliament Hill in the Centre Block's Hall of Honour.
Welcome to Militaria, Shara. And could you tell me what you brought from the Army Museum today?
Sure. So I brought some artifacts from matron Laura Hubley. So the items that I brought were her medal group, her nurses, or what I would call a doctor's bag, and a civilian suitcase that was given to her by her nurses.
On this case, we've got the tag, and the tag is from her trip to Vimy in 1936 as part of the Vimy pilgrimage.
So this is a real beauty. It's a civilian suitcase, but her nurses purchased it for her as a gift. There's a dedication on the inside, as well as all the bits that she would need to travel with. So she would have brought this over with her to England and then France for the Vimy pilgrimage.
Inside, we have the contents that she would have used
Right.
for her personal traveling. So it's, again, it is just a suitcase, but it's not just a suitcase.
But it's not, yeah.
Because it has quite an interesting historical significance when you tie the Vimy pilgrimages, because I can't imagine there was a lot of women that went over to that. So Matron Hubley was part of the Permanent Army Medical Corps when she decided to transfer to the Canadian Expeditionary Force. The Canadian Expeditionary Force was the army that was raised during the First World War to fight overseas. So if you were serving in the army when the First World War broke out, in order to get overseas, you had to get permission to leave your unit, join this Canadian Expeditionary Force, and then you went overseas. So Shara, how did the museum receive these artifacts?
Well, about 7 years ago, her great-nephew approached us to bring the lot that belonging to her, and we were so happy to receive it. But it was in the family's heirlooms up in the attic, and they weren't quite sure how to proceed with them.
It's a good story because it's, of course, a woman and her wartime accomplishments. I believe that the nurses had to be single in order to join because they didn't want the frail female form worried about their husbands back in Canada or possibly at the front. So they wanted a woman that was focused on what they were doing, and that was nursing, and that was it, nursing. And I believe this was not unusual at the time. I believe there were some hospitals that to be a nurse, you had to be single. It was, again, it was a sign of the time. If you were working as a woman, your whole job was the job. You weren't looking after a household, you weren't looking after a man, you weren't looking after kids. And I believe that's the whole reason behind it.
So these are all the items that were inside her case. There's this beautiful cigarette case that was given to her. It has a dedication on the front, presented to nursing sister Laura May Hubley, RRC, which references the medal she received, by the Officers and Headquarters Military District Number 1. And the date is London, June 24th, 1934. Just a beautiful wooden and silver case.
And of course, that's London, Ontario, not London, England, because that's where Military District Number 1 was headquartered. So Shara, what are you going to have to do to this lot to get it to a point where it's stable enough to be put on exhibit?
I think our medical bag is close. It would get a leather treatment, which is just a conditioning that most people would do with their boots or something like that. So that's ready to go. The concern is the metal grouping. They were not mounted, which is this portion here that gets put on when we received them. So we would want to make sure we mounted them so that they could be presented properly and in the right order. And then this bag here, we want to figure out a way that we can open it. Currently, as you can see, we can't open it without it flopping over. And inside is where her nursing sisters put a dedication. And so we need to sort of work on a way to do that so that that can be open so we can show the items inside and make a little vignette. I think sometimes when people consider the Great Wars, as well as even Afghanistan, though we are getting more women's stories in there, they see officers and they see sometimes privates and other ranks, but they don't see women. And the nursing story is starting to come out. I think a lot of groups have done some great research and exposure on that. But for me, that's the heart. If you're injured, you want to be cared for. And that's in part what they did. They cared. And I love that aspect of their story.
So thank you so much for bringing in these wonderful artifacts from the Army Museum. I think it's a great story, and it's one that's I think is really good to share with people.
Great. Thank you so much for having us.
My thoughts in today's piece are that I think it's a very interesting grouping. To me, it's an important grouping because it's a grouping about a woman, and we don't have a lot of material from women, especially early women. And I know the First World War is not early in the great time frame of life, but it is, especially when it comes to women, because there were some nursing sisters that went to South Africa, but not very many. It wasn't really until the First World War that you start seeing women, and women weren't a part of the Army until the Second World War.